Joining me now for a closer look at what's playing itself out in that market scene is Mia Kruger from Kruger International. Mia, a pleasure. Good afternoon to you.
Hi there, nice to be with you.
Wonderful. Thank you for being with us, Mia. It's a brand new week. It's a short one, I think, in most parts of the world. I'm keen to get your thoughts on what we might be contending with this week.
Yes, I mean, there's been a lot of talk around what's happening in the US, especially on the rate hike front. Over the last week, we've heard a more cautious view from the Fed, which is very much in line with our anticipation that it's highly unlikely for them to start reducing the rates as long as there are any concerns for further inflation pressures that we could see. And I mean, that's very apparent due to the fact that there are still numerous uncertainties around what the energy prices will be doing, basically having a major impact, and then of course the housing component of the inflation. So it doesn't look like inflation is contained to such an extent that they would be happy to start decreasing their rates. And that really pulls through to South Africa as well. Our economy looks pretty weak, but we are at the mercy of what's happening to the greatest extent in the US, and would be detrimental to the rand should the Monetary Committee in South Africa start cutting rates before the US does.
I actually read an article by Vanguard Asset Management last week, Mia, where they think that there'll be no interest rate cuts at all this year. It is a rather, extreme, stance to take at this point. But as you say, we're looking at the data here. And right now, the data just isn't actually giving us an indication of these interest rates. We know what Jerome Powell has said coming out of the US Fed. Do you think no interest rates on the cards at all is on the cards?
Well, that has most definitely become a larger sort of, has attracted a larger probability so far, where that was not on the cards. They still mentioned that they will start cutting rates this year, but there's no indication of how large those interest rate cuts will be. And I mean, because they are focused on the data, it can be pushed out as we go along. So we'll just have to wait and see how the data unfolds and what the real effect on the inflation rate really is.
Moving on to looking at some company news coming out of South Africa. I think the big one of the day certainly is MTN. Mia, keen to get your thoughts here. It just looks like it was a tough period based on what we're seeing coming out of Nigeria.
Yes, I mean, so if you consider MTN as a company, close to 40% of their revenue is generated from Nigeria. It's a very Africa-focused market, and because of these African currencies being so volatile, especially measured against the dollar, it is a very volatile earnings environment for MTN when we convert that to rands normally as well. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. We've seen a massive depreciation of close to 100% of the naira against the dollar since those forex changes have been introduced in Nigeria, and that's had a massive impact. We've seen that reduction, as you mentioned, over 70% on their earnings, the influence on their earnings. South Africa only really comprises about 25% of revenue from MTN. So any changes or any sort of difficulties in Africa will have a massive impact on the earnings for MTN, and that's been the trend sort of over the last 10 years. Every time we've seen MTN under pressure, that's really been the case.
We've also seen the share price come under real pressure, Mia, but we know there's actually other really cool things happening within MTN, like what's happening with its fintech business and the MasterCard deal. And I'm just wondering, looking at the traditional business versus where it's going, might investors just be a little bit maybe not confused, but trying to figure out which they want to place more value on, what we're seeing happening with the traditional business or what could happen with the fintech business?
Listen, placing some probability on what could happen is always a sort of the upside of any business going forward, considering what they can do, how they can grow their business, and what they're busy with. But the reality of the fact is that they are still very much dependent on their current income streams. These fintech areas of the business are loss-making still. It takes a lot of capital to bring these divisions off the ground and to make them profitable. And it takes a long time for them to be really profitable. So before they can have a massive impact on the earnings of the business, it will take a lot of stealth from you as an investor to push through. again, when you consider the global perspective of MTN being a telecommunication tech company, compare it to what your alternatives are globally, it's just very difficult for you to sort of make the case that this is a better investment than going with, say, a Meta or a Google and one of those companies, because those companies are also very much focused on telecommunication and communication as such. So yes, it's a tough environment. Africa remains a very difficult place to invest.
Let's also talk about AdTech. They, I think, are having a much better time, at the right place at the right time, at a time when literally South Africans are so eager for good education. And they seem to really be, I guess, the money keeps to be rolling in as a result.
Yes, I mean, it's once again, it's a clear indication of the business environment and the economic environment within South Africa, where the government doesn't have money to spend on schools, and the infrastructure of education in South Africa is extremely weak when you look from a governmental perspective and what the government is actually putting into that, and that's why private schools and private tuition has become so attractive for parents, and that's really the main driver for AdTech. And we consider that would probably still keep on going.
Interestingly enough, I mean, they've got a smaller portion of a rest of Africa business, but they're actually seeing a boom in that rest of Africa business. And I guess that's just on the back of, a private school education in the parts of the continent. I'm keen just to get your thoughts here. I think they're saying that that division's revenue increased by 14%. Still, I could see more upside here where education at least is concerned.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, there's a lot of upside potential for AdTech. Most of their businesses are only utilizing about 68% of their ultimate school capacity. So there still is, without sort of going and having great capital expenses, they can utilize these capacities that are underutilized at the moment. So there's still a massive drive or potential for a drive for earnings growth for the company without capital expenditure.
Before we move on, keen to get your thoughts also on Gemfields, a difficult period for them. I think a cancelled auction and just PGM prices, all of it are playing into a difficult set of numbers.
Absolutely. I mean, besides the fact that they had the cancelled auction, they also had the write-down on the platinum business, and the business environment is very challenging for them at this stage. We've also known that despite the fact that platinum group metals and some of the commodity prices have started to recover, it's still quite a bit down from where we saw it a year or two ago. So yes, the business is under pressure despite the price side of the commodities, because of the difficult business environment that they find themselves in with the cancelled auction, with the write-downs, etc. It doesn't look too good for them. They had to delve into the income reserves to pay their dividends, and that's always a worrisome sign.
Also keen now to get your stock pick, Mia. Which counter are you loving today?
Yes, well, one of the companies that we've been holding for quite some time is ASML, and with a big theme around tech and tech-driven and AI, and how big AI has become in the world, and what the potential and the upside of that is. Even though it has also driven the valuation side, it's still very much a part of where the world is moving to. ASML is then one of the producers of these chip makers. They are the guys who make the machines, who produce the chips, and some of the best machines in the world are produced by ASML. They've got quite a strong position in the market for those machines, so pretty much a monopoly to an extent. And yes, it's a strong position and a strong entry point for you to have into this market. A quality company that we don't think will go out of favor, high barriers to entry in its business, and it's probably going to be a quality company for quite some years to come.
Brilliant. A pleasure having you with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was your midday markets update. And of course, Mia's surname has changed. It's Kriegler from Kruger International.